Morning, LifePoint Church. My name is Brady. I'm a follower of Jesus, and I'm really glad I get to be here. Last week, I got the opportunity to do what many of you have done, but to experience our worship gathering online. It was a neat experience. It was fun to get to be a part of what so many of us have been a part of that I haven't really gotten the chance to be a part of. And it was neat to hear Chris preach the word and just bring it and just see that we have so many people in our community that are gifted and that are talented. And I just love that our community is about the community that God is bringing together and not about one person. And that just does my heart a lot of good. We're in a series called The Scarlet Thread, and we're in this series because Jesus thought that it was very important that all of his disciples understood that the entire Hebrew Scriptures, or what we call the Old Testament, that it points to him, that the entire thing is about Jesus. In fact, he set them down, and it says that he explained from the law and the prophets everything that points to him. And so what we've done is we've gone through the Old Testament, we've taken these different stories, and we've demonstrated how it's always been about Jesus, that Jesus is the fulfillment of all the Scriptures. And this is huge. And so now, we're coming to the last week in this series, and so I'm excited about this last piece because it's a huge piece. We started with God as the creator, right? We talked about creation and the magnitude and just massiveness of creation and that Jesus is the God that created the heavens and the earth. And then we looked at the fall. We looked at how humanity chose to rebel against God, right? He created this beautiful garden. He placed them in this garden. He wanted them to rule with him. And then we rebelled. And in that rebellion, all of creation broke. And we experience so much of that brokenness now. But God said it's not always going to be this way. There is someone who's going to come, and he promised that there would be this deliverer, this serpent slayer. And we began to get different pieces of what this person would be like. And we found that, he's better than Noah, who was righteous. And he's going to be better than Abraham, who was faithful. And he's going to be better than Moses, who was the deliverer and the intercessor of Israel. And then he's going to be better than David, who's this warrior, poet, giant slayer. And you begin to think, with this resume, what is this guy going to be like? Like, how great is this person going to be? Because there's no way anyone that I know could live up to that. Who is worthy? If we fast forward to the book of Revelation, it's the last book in your Bible. The book of Revelation is John, who was one of Jesus' closest disciples. He has this vision that God gives him this vision, and he gives him this glimpse behind the curtain. So you and I, we experience the world with our 5 different senses. What we see, what we taste, what we touch, what we smell, right? This is how we interact with the world. But there is a world behind all of that, a world beyond all of that we can't experience with our 5 senses, right? The heavenly realm, the spiritual realm. And God gives John like this glimpse behind the curtain, and he's transported into the throne room of God. And here's what happens in the book of Revelation, chapter 5. It says this is John talking, then I saw in the right hand of him, this is God, in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne, a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. He's in the throne room. And basically what you have going on is there's this throne in the center of heaven, which is in the center of the universe. And every creature is surrounding this throne, looking in at this moment. And no one is worthy. And John begins to weep because this is an important scroll, but no one can open it. And I think about worthiness. Who is worthy? When I think about that, I obviously think about a superhero movie because that's just the way that my mind works. I think about the movie Thor. And if you haven't seen the movie Thor, basically Thor is this superhero who has this hammer called Mjolnir. And this is like his weapon, right? It's an important piece of who he is. It's an important piece of his armor. It's an important piece of what he does. But at the beginning of the movie, he's just not that great, in hhis character. Now, if you look at him, you think, wow, you're amazing, right? But his father, his father sends him down to earth, all these different things that happen, and then he whispers to the hammer and puts this enchantment on it. And he says, whoever is found worthy, whoever holds this hammer and is worthy will possess the power of Thor. And the entire movie is now about what is worthy? What makes him worthy? What is this X factor of worthiness? Because it's not good looks because he already has those. It's not strength because he already has that. It's not popularity because he already has that. What is this mysterious X factor of worthiness? And I can relate to this because this is a question that I've wrestled with. I've desired to know what is the X factor that makes someone great. Like, how do you achieve greatness? Because I've wanted to be great my entire life. When I was a kid, it was about being a superhero. Like, I thought I was a superhero. I wanted to be a superhero. I wanted to be this great superhero. And then when I was in high school, I wanted to be a great basketball player. Then when I was in college, I wanted to be a famous rock star. And now as a pastor, I want to be a great pastor. I want to be a great teacher of God's word. And I want to know, how do I unlock greatness? Who is worthy? And what we find in this passage that we're going to study is the key to worthiness, the key to greatness. And we're going to be in the Jesus Storybook Bible. And the reason that we're in this is because a couple of reasons. One, because we have people of all ages here, and I think the Jesus Storybook Bible can really relate. But also, I think it's important that we use different translations and different paraphrases of the Bible because together they help shape our view of Scripture well. Our favorite translation here at LifePoint is the ESV, the English Standard Version. It's a great Bible. The NASB is also great. The NIV, right? There are a lot of great translations, and it's good to study them together. Even paraphrases like the Message or the Jesus Storybook Bible. And what I love about this is not only does it speak or write in ways that are clear and simple, but it points everything to Jesus, which is super important. So we're going to be the Jesus Storybook Bible, and we're going to start with a story that I began a couple weeks ago about Moses. And here's how it goes. It says, Joseph and his brothers, so Joseph is the son of Jacob, who's the son of Isaac, who's the son of Abraham. So he's a great-great-grandson of Abraham. Joseph and his brothers grew old, and they died. But their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule. But this Pharaoh, and that's just the title for an Egyptian king, this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph, and he didn't like God's people. He made them into his slaves, and he beat them and made them work harder and harder. And God's people cried out to God to rescue them. You can imagine being forced into slavery, being forced to work without pay, being forced to work harder and harder and harder. They cried out to God, and God heard them, and he remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people. He would find a way to set them free. But one day, Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. It was a bush behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves weren't burning up. So he took a closer look. Moses, boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. The bush was talking to him. I've heard my people's cries, God said. I've seen their tears, so I've come down to rescue them. Go tell Pharaoh to let my people go free. Moses was afraid, but God said, I will be with you. I will be with you. So Moses went to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, Moses began. God, said Pharaoh. Never heard of him. Moses kept going. God said, let his people go free. Why should I? Pharaoh said. Don't want to. Won't. So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water, but still, Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping in your bed frogs, in your hair frogs, in your soup frogs, all over, everywhere, frogs. Could you imagine that? Frogs in your bed? You get in your bed and there are frogs in there? Oh, you're eating your soup and then ribbit. Make them go away, Pharaoh screamed. Then your people can go. So God took away the frogs, but Pharaoh changed his mind. You can't go, he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats, but Pharaoh said no. So then God sent swarms of flies buzzing in your eyes, flies. After that, sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstones and a storm of locusts, then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation and everything was coming undone, falling back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. But each time, Pharaoh said, make it stop and then I'll let them go. And each time, when God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, actually, no, you can't go. Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, obey God or he will have to send the worst thing of all. And Pharaoh just laughed. So God said, the oldest boy in each family in all of Egypt will die. But God wanted to spare his people. So he told them how to escape this painful event. It was the only way to escape. God told his people to take their best lamb and to kill it and to put some of its blood on their front doors. When the angel of death passes over your house, Moses explained, God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you. That night, it was just as God had said. Suddenly piercing the darkness, echoing down the corridors of the palace came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. Get out, Pharaoh shouted, just go. And so that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever and ever. Now, there's some really neat stuff in this story. And I want to zoom in and see what makes someone worthy. So worthy that they can open up the scroll that is in the right hand of God. And we see it here. Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. It says, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. Now get this, here's what's going on. First of all, God says, I'm about to do something so earth-shattering that I want you to reorient your calendar around this. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. Because I tell you what, no matter what people say, what's the first day of the year? January 1st. No matter, yeah, see, but it's not. It's not. In my book, it's the beginning of September. It's when school starts, right? The end of August, beginning of September. For me, that's the beginning of the year. When I picture my year, I start it then. I don't know why. I can't help it. I've been out of school for 20 some odd years, and I still think about it in that way. I still think about our year in semesters starting in September, even though everyone tells me that it's January 1st, even though the ball drops, midnight on January 1st, like it still seems this way. So imagine God coming and saying, there's something that's going to happen that is going to so drastically change the way that you think, the way that you see the world, the way that you view yourself, that you are going to reorient your calendar around this. It's that important. I want this to begin your year. I want this to redefine you. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a lamb and I want you to bring it into your home. Now he describes what this lamb is like in verse 5. It says, your lamb shall be without blemish. That means it doesn't have any spots. It doesn't have any defects. There's nothing wrong with this lamb at all. Without blemish. A male a year old, so a 1-year-old male, so this is a baby lamb, right? You may take it from the sheep, from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. Now, this just took a drastic turn, okay? Imagine a lamb. Now, when I think about a lamb, I think about a little bitty lamb, a year-old lamb, a baby lamb, the word innocence comes to my mind. I can't think of something more innocent. Here's what innocence means. It means not guilty of a crime or an offense. It means free from moral wrong, not corrupted. It means helpless, harmless. That's innocent. That's what I think of when I think of a baby lamb. I think of something that's innocent. It's pure, it's helpless. It can't do anything for itself, right? You've got to lead it to food, you've got to lead it to water, you've got to take care of it, you've got to protect it. Now imagine taking this lamb into your family for 4 days. What's going to happen? You're going to get attached to this thing, right? You're going to love it, you're going to care for it, you're going to play with it, you're going to name it, you're going to feed it. It's going to be a part of your family. And then all of a sudden your dad's going to say, okay, time to kill it. And you're going to look at him, you're like, Dad, who are you? Why would you do that? Kids look at your dad, say, Dad, why would you make us do that? I mean, what's wrong with your dad? I mean, for real. No, I mean, but this is what's going on, right? In all of the nation of Israel, every household would take in this lamb. They would care for it for 4 days, this innocent, spotless, helpless lamb, and then they would kill it. Why would they do that? Here's why. In verse 7, it says, then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. So basically, you're putting on the door frame of the house when you walk in. So that the front door of your house, you have this door frame, right? It's how your door is held up. It opens and closes, right? So you would paint the blood over the doorpost. And here's why, verse 12. For I, God, will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So God's going to come through the entire land of Egypt. And he's not, do you have a question? What? You made a bingo? Are you kidding me? That is amazing. Here's what I need. I need your mom to email our Plattner at LifePointQCY.org, and she'll give you a prize. This just started. So here's what's going on. I don't know if you knew this, but this was bingo night at LifePoint Church. And so it's going to be exciting, folks. Where are we? We're at the Passover, right? We're, 3,500 years ago in the Passover. Here's what God is doing. He's going to go through the land of Egypt, and he's going to make this plague happen, but he's not going to distinguish between the Egyptians or the Israelites. Everyone is going to be under this curse of judgment. And the only way you're going to escape this is if you identify with the lamb. If you identify yourself as someone who has the lamb's blood, and the lamb's blood is going to cause God to pass over you. Otherwise, the firstborn kid is going to die in your family. This is a big deal. Now, I tell you what, when I began to think about this, I started thinking about my little dog. Now, if you've been around for a while, I've got a little bitty dog, a little 11-pound Yorkie poo. And just to be honest, okay, when I first met Annabelle, I was prejudiced against little dogs. I did not like little dogs, and I judged people that had little dogs, especially the ones that put clothes on the dogs. I did. I totally did. But here's the thing. My wife, who was not my wife at the time, she had just gotten this dog, and so it came with her, right? So if I wanted to marry her, I had to also take the dog, and she was worth it, so worth it, right? Abundantly more worth it than I could have imagined. But she came with this little dog. And so I began to take care of this dog. And you know what happened? My heart got attached to this dog. And now I'm wrapped around its little paw. Right? Like she owns me. She owns me. Like, I'll do anything for this dog. Like, I love this dog so much. Now, we've had her for 15 years. And if you know much about dogs, like, that's about the expiration date of a dog. And so, it's been kind of sad. She's been deteriorating. And then on Monday, she got all this fluid in her lungs. And she was really struggling to breathe. And so we called the vet, and the vet came over, and the vet gave her the shot and said, hey, if this doesn't work, tomorrow morning when I come, we're going to have to put her down. And I tell you what, man, Jennifer and I were just undone. We were so sad, so heartbroken. Just thinking about this, like our sweet little helpless dog dying. Now, good news is that the medicine worked and her lungs, got rid of the fluid and she's doing okay. But I tell you what, when I think about this scenario in Egypt, that's not what's going on. It's not taking a lamb and putting it out of its misery. This is taking a baby lamb. So imagine my baby dog, but 14 years ago, a year old, this sweet little dog, and then I commit a crime, okay? So I do something wrong. I steal or I murder. And instead of me going to jail, instead of me getting punished, I kill my dog instead. That gets me out of jail. And I'm thinking, like, I would never do that. Like, how in the world could I choose to kill my dog for something that I did wrong? That doesn't make sense. Like, you don't do that. Like, why would I do that? But that's the only choice. There was no other way. It was either the lamb or the firstborn child. And we see this theme throughout Scripture, right? As Hebrews said, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins, right? It has to happen this way. We see it with Adam and Eve, right? In the Garden of Eden, they sin. And what does God do? He kills an animal so that they can be clothed in the animal's skin. And then you see it with Cain and Abel. Cain offers this offering to God that's grain. And then Abel offers this offering to God that's an animal. And God accepts Abel's offering. Sorry, farmers. Like, he accepts the offering of the animal because without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. And then when Abraham's supposed to offer Isaac, what substitutes in its place? In Isaac's place? It's an animal. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. And so that's what happens. And this is such a big deal. This moment in time in the history of Israel is such a big deal. It's so huge that it changes their calendar, their identification with a lamb taking the place for them changes everything. We see it in verse 14. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast every single year. I want you to remember this is what happened. I want you to remember this. And I want you to do this over and over and over so that you know that without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. That you will die because of the penalty for your sin unless you continually sacrifice a pure, spotless, innocent lamb. Now, this is where we see the key to what it means to be worthy. That level of worthy, to open the scroll that's in the right hand of God the Father. Back in the book of Revelation, chapter 5, it says this, and one of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. And when I think about this, I think, yes, a lion, that's a conqueror. That's an animal that's worthy. When I think about a person who's worthy, I think of someone who's great, who's powerful. I think about a superhero. But it's important to understand, how does Jesus conquer? Does he conquer by slaying? That's not what we see. Isaiah chapter 53. This is a prophecy about Jesus and what he would do. It said, he, Jesus, was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth like a what? Like a lamb. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter. Like a sheep that's before its shearers is silent. He opened not his mouth. earlier in that chapter, it says this: surely he, Jesus, has borne or carried our griefs, right? He carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities, and upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds we are healed. That Jesus conquers sin, not by power and might, but by his sacrificial death. We see it in Colossians. And you, us, we were dead in our trespasses and in the uncircumcision of our flesh. God made us alive together with Jesus, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in Jesus. How did Jesus conquer sin and death? On the cross. How did Jesus conquer the powers and the principalities and conquer the spiritual forces of evil? By the cross, by giving of himself sacrificially as a lamb. That's how Jesus conquered, and that's how Jesus is worthy. And we see it proclaimed in the book of Revelation, the next verse. And between the throne and the four living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain. He said the Lion of Judah conquered, and John looks and he sees a lamb that's been slain, Jesus. And he went and he took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the four living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song saying, worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals. Why? For you were slain, and by your blood you ransom people for God, from every tribe and every language and every people and nation. Jesus is worthy because he conquered, not by slaying, but by being slayed. I tell you what, this moment is hard to grasp. It's hard to imagine the beauty of this moment, the excitement of this moment. But I think I got a glimpse of it one day. So I told you I'm into superhero movies. And Marvel, over the last 10 years, well, it's more now, but in a 10-year period, they put together, I think it's 22 movies that are all about the same thing, right? They're all these different origin stories and different characters that are forming and shaping to form this group called the Avengers. And Thor, right, he has this hammer, Mjolnir. This hammer that could only be picked up by him because he's the only one who's worthy. But then you begin to see this theme play out. And in the second Avengers, they're all sitting around in the living room on couches and they're kind of having a good time. And Thor's hammer's sitting there. And they're like, I could lift that thing. And so Hawkeye comes up and he tries to lift it and he can't even budge it. And then Rhodey gets up and he tries to lift it. And, he gets on, his suit and he's trying to lift it with the power of his iron suit. And then Iron Man does, and he can't lift it. And then Captain America steps up. And if you know anything about Captain America, he's this guy, he was this tiny little kid. He always got beat up, but he had this impeccable character, right? He was always fighting for justice. He was always fighting for the underdog. He was willing to sacrifice himself. And so he, then becomes a super soldier through this, this incredible serum, this magical serum, whatever it is. And he becomes this incredible, specimen of a human being. And he steps up. And when he steps up, Thor gets a little bit nervous because he knows what Captain America's like. And when he tries to do it, it budges just a little bit. And you see Thor freak out. And then they move on and they continue on, And then it comes to the last movie, Avengers Endgame. And they're fighting Thanos, the ultimate bad guy. And, they're all fighting against him, and they're all getting knocked down. He's so strong, and there's this moment where Thor's going after Thanos, and then Thanos takes his own weapon, Thor's weapon, and he starts to kill him with it. And by this time, Thor has got two weapons, and his hammer has been knocked down, and Thor's about to die. And everyone's taken down. And you're like, what's going to happen? And then all of a sudden, his hammer Mjolnir comes flying in and knocks Thanos off of Thor. And you're like, what's going on? and you see his hammer fly back into the hand of Captain America. And in that moment, at midnight, in the opening showing, which is only Marvel movie fans and me, it erupts with cheers. People jump out of their seat and are applauding because this moment of worthiness that has been building up through the years in all these movies has finally been achieved, that Captain America is the one worthy to hold the hammer, to wield this weapon. And in that moment in the theater, I thought, this is what it's going to be like. In that moment when we're all surrounding the throne and we're looking to Jesus, the one who is worthy, and we just erupt out into cheers, into a new song. You are worthy because you are the Lamb who conquered by giving your life for us. There's a reason why Passover is the foundational moment and the foundational symbol for all of Israel. There's a reason why it starts their calendar. There's a reason why it defines their identity. It's the same reason why the cross is the foundational moment for us. The reason why the Lord's Supper is the foundational symbol for us that we continue to look back on. Because Jesus is worthy. Because he's the Lamb, the pure, spotless, innocent Passover Lamb who conquered, not by slain, but by being slayed. That's how Jesus is worthy. And I think about it, how do I become worthy? How do I become great? That's the path for Jesus, but it's not the path for the rest of us. The path to greatness for the rest of us is not by being powerful or mighty or glorious or wealthy or successful or talented. It's not by being in control, having it all together. It's not by raising your kids well. It's not by climbing the top of the corporate ladder, achieving, your dreams and your hopes. It's not by providing for your family. Our path to greatness is by painting the blood of Jesus over the doorpost of our lives. See, we don't have any greatness in and of ourselves. Our greatness is tied to our identification with the Lamb, with Jesus. We are great only because he is great, not because of anything that we do, not because of anything that we achieve, not because of anything that we could pay. Jesus is great. Jesus is worthy. And this is it, man. This is the gospel. This is the foundation. It's not simply part of a well-balanced gospel. This is the main ingredient. This is everything, folks. Men and women, we've got to understand this. This has got to be the foundation of our lives. This has got to be the way that we orient our worldview around. It's got to begin our days. It's got to shape our thought processes. It's got to inform our decisions. We've got to allow this reality to reshape our entire lives, that Jesus, the Son of the Most High God, voluntarily became the innocent, helpless, sacrificial lamb, giving his life for us. Jesus is the only one in the history of the cosmos who's worthy, because he conquered not by might, but by self-sacrifice. And when we place ourselves under him in this by faith, we're saved. We're invited into his family. That's the beauty of the gospel. And the gospel is not just good for one moment in our lives, giving us a ticket into God's eternal family. It's good for every moment of our lives. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, when we fix our eyes on him as the Passover sacrificial lamb, it shapes the way that we think. It changes the way that we feel. It changes the way that we experience the world, the way that we interact with one another. It changes everything. It shapes the way that, our joy works out. It informs our hope. It informs our peace. The gospel changes everything. This is why every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. This is why every knee will bow. If you want to know who is worthy, there's only one. It's the Lion who became the Lamb and gave his life for us.